introduce this by saying, really, we've been through pretty much the principles to action. Some of our partners are thinking about redoing curriculum and talking about what the resources look like. And I think that's a really important skill, and it's something I think we need to be able to offer is some sample lessons that they could draw on. I've always heard, as teachers often, hey, Linda, I know you've heard this too, when we talk about teaching differently, they go, that's great, but I don't have the resources to do it. I have this book. And so we say, look, don't make the change in 1 year. Just change one lesson every 2 weeks. And then if you get a colleague to change one lesson every 2 weeks, in 5 years, you have a whole set of lessons. So you don't have to do it every day to start off with. Pretty much what happens is kids buy into it and they go, well, hold on. So what we have now are some resources that we can help people do that, but that's something we want to work on. So Linda, you want to start us off?
Yeah, and I just want to reinforce what Chad said. This is, once you've done this a little bit, it gets easier, but it's not something that people are just automatically going to know how to do. How do you level up a task? And we can define what that means in a minute. So I also like Chad's comment that maybe you do it one problem every 2 weeks or one problem every 3 weeks, and then you start to build a repertoire. So anyway, just to give you a little bit of background, you may recall that when Peg Smith talked to us, she talked a little bit about low cognitive demand and high cognitive demand tasks. And much of what we find in our typical textbook, and Chad, can I share my screen?
Yes, you can. Let me make sure you have, I think you can anyway, but try, if you need me to give you permission, I'm happy to.
Okay. I did. So,
okay.
All right. So let me start with this task.
Linda, I think, okay, good. Perfect. Yep. Love it.
Got it?
Yeah.
So I just cut and pasted this from a website that had worksheets on it. And there's a funny story that goes along with a very similar, I mean, this is something you find in textbooks, probably in Guatemala similar, but with Guatemalan coins, where kids have to count the coins and figure out what the value is. I was doing a workshop with a group of teachers many years ago. It was March, and one of the teachers came in. We'd had several sessions on rich problems, and one of the teachers came in and she said, I did something this week that I want to share. And I said, what was that? And she said, she got to a page in her textbook. It might not have been this many coins because I believe it was first grade, that looked like this. And she said, oh, we've been counting coins and doing stuff like this in September. So I thought my kids could do this, no problem. So I thought, how could I make this a more engaging or richer task? And I still remember this, and this had to be 10 years ago. So this is what she gave the kids instead of having them do this page in their textbook. Francine went to the store to buy some fruit. She can get 3 bananas for 50 cents. She has lots of coins, but no half dollars and no pennies. How many different ways could Francine make 50 cents to pay for the bananas? So if you think about this task and you think about this task, I guess the first thing I would ask you is, how are they similar?
Well, both are talking about money, or money is included in both of them. And we are working with
Money's-
cents,
Right.
with pennies, yeah.
Maybe also that it's like asking for different combinations of the coins.
So in this
sure.
one, Allie, the combination of coins are given, right? Do you notice anything? Yeah. Okay, and in this one, the kids have to look for the combinations of coins, but it does have something to do with combinations of coins. That may be about the only way they're really similar. How are they different?
Well, they both involve skip counting as well. There's some sort of sophisticated counting that's involved with each of these.
So I'm going to ask you another question, because when I first cut and pasted this, I didn't notice it. Well, now that I'm looking, it's not totally true. But what do you notice about the coins here?
I think those are both nickels, but they have different faces that are being, or either the one side is being, yeah, which is strange.
You notice anything else? I didn't notice this when I first cut and pasted it, but as you guys were talking, I went back and looked at this and went, whoa, what do you notice about the order the coins are in? So if you're
They're
not familiar,
ordered by
Value.
like from so in the top one it's 25 cents or a quarter, and then a dime, nickel, and pennies.
Mhm.
And then similarly in the second one it's also 25 cents, 5 cents, and then a penny, and then 10, 5, and 1. Yeah, so they're already ordered for you, I guess.
already ordered from the coin with the greatest value to the coin with the least value. One of the things I think is really funny about this task, the more I look at these, the more I giggle.
Yes.
I don't know if anybody pulls coins out of their pocket in that order. And excuse me, I'm fighting a tickle for several days. So the purpose of this may be to show kids, to demonstrate how you might order the coins to add them up. But in this one, the kids just have a handful of coins and they have to figure out what they're going to do to make 50 cents, right? Which task do you think would engage kids more?
The second one,
Why?
because it's related to something that they know. I'm thinking maybe in my class is something that I might adapt to my class easily. We're talking about bananas. They know what bananas are, and maybe changing. Well, we do have pennies and dollars here, so maybe it's something similar to my story or my real world.
Coins, of course.
Sorry?
You would use Guatemalan coins. This is just.
If I was in Ecuador, they use dollars.
Yeah.
Ecuador. I'm sorry. Yeah. Does Ecuador uses the same? Do they use the same coins we do too?
Mhm.
Yeah. That's why I
Okay.
said it will be really easy for me to understand this, or my kids to understand this kind of problem, because it's really similar to our context.
Okay. Okay. Anything else you notice about this problem that would be more engaging than that first one?
Yeah, you can combine everything you want and explore. And the first one, there's nothing, well, not too much to explore. So you can try different things and then arrange or use whatever you have in order to reach, and then have more kind of questions that can follow up this problem.
Mhm.
Anything else?
Hace pensar un poquito que te enganchan más con este segundo, porque independientemente los niños lo primero que quieren o aprenden a hacer cuando son chiquitos es como comprar. Entonces cuando tienen como dinero están como, ay, cuánto sí, cuánto no, cuánto me cabe, cuánto no, cuánto me alcanza, aunque independientemente no saben que están haciendo operaciones, pero ellos ya en su contexto están jugando, están contando, están explorando.
So Fatima says that one of the first things that kids are learning and already doing is buying things and seeing like how much do they need to spend, how much money do they have, what else can they buy, and so it's already something that will catch their attention because it's like a context that's real for them from the time that they are really, really small.
Love that, Gus. That's great. I think that is one of the reasons. I mean, I've heard this from many people who have done work internationally. Around the world, before kindergarten, kids are stronger at math in other countries than they are in the US, because children go to the market. Like Fatima would maybe send her kids to the market and go, here's some money, buy this, this, and this. And they want to save money for gum or juice on the way home. So they're negotiating and adding and subtracting and multiplying. In the US, it's just kids sit in a cart with their mom, get the food, and then they don't have to keep track because they just put it on credit card. And so there's no math at all.
Credit card. The other thing is mom probably uses a credit card when she buys this stuff.
But can I say one more thing about this problem, the second problem, Linda? Because I also love this problem, because even with younger kids, you can actually, like, I'm thinking, okay, so now how many different combinations can we have of 50 cents? So we're gonna get a set, right? I don't know, maybe it's 5 different ways we can arrange the coins. Maybe it's 6. Is there a pattern that falls out? What about a 40? And is 45 more than 40 or less than 40? And is 50 less than? And so all of a sudden it's really becomes alive. Maybe that pattern is always continually growing. I think probably it is, but those are things that you can look for even at a young age.
So when kids approach, if you talk about the role of the teacher when you look at this task, let's just say the kids have had some experience and you talk about the role of the teacher. What's the role of the teacher in either teaching this or I'm going to answer my own question here. I'm trying really hard not to. What's the role of the teacher with this kind of a thing?
Good.
Or what do you imagine would be the role of the teacher?
Do you mean with the first task or the second task, or just like in
The first task.
So just with the first task, what's the role?
Mm-hmm. What would the teacher do? What would you see your teachers doing if the kids were going to work on a worksheet like this? How would the teacher begin?
Well, they will try to make the students rearrange things the way they should. They will do that. Maybe I think if they are used to arrange the 5 cents with the 25 with the quarter, then that's the way they will do, and they will maybe force the students to do that. What I would like to is let them try and explore and explain why they arranged the way they did, and why do you think this way is better than this one. That's what I would like to, even if they have this kind of tasks, but I don't think that will happen.
Mm-hmm.
So I like what you just said, because it's so often we go out and observe, and when I was observing classes in the United States as well as in Ecuador and Guatemala, when I go and observe classes, pretty much as the teacher traditionally starts with showing the kids how to do it. And Paula, as you mentioned, a specific strategy. So, it might be easiest and they might do it through asking questions. Where would you start with that first one? But usually the teacher has some sort of a strategy or a goal in mind to show kids a way to solve it, and then the kids just replicate that, correct? Is that what you see?
Well, can I just say also, Linda, you made this great observation. First of all, Alex, your observation that the coins are flipped is really good too, because it could be misleading, and that's a conversation to have. Frankly, I like that misleading nature because this whole question is set up for the kid to get the right answer. Like, I think the goal of the teacher in this textbook isn't to explore, but to get the right answer. And let me help you do that as easily as possible. And you said this great point, Linda. In the real world, that doesn't happen. You have to make mistakes and learn and order and organize and develop a strategy, which is the power of the second question.
Yeah, and actually, one of the things you didn't notice, and I'm going to share with you what happened in this teacher's class when we finished talking about this. Unless the teacher decides to have real coins in the classroom, these are just pictures the kids are using, which is very different than if they have to move around coins and combine them. So if the teacher is astute enough to bring coins so the kids can actually lay them out and figure out how they want to count them, that's much different than looking at a static picture and trying to figure out what do I do with this. So what do you envision the kids doing?
I mean, if I'm thinking about if Alex as a kid, what Alex as a kid would be doing would be, I'm very visual, and I would probably be like literally either writing the values of the coins like next to the coins, or like combining those. So for example, if it's like the 25 cent, like it's the quarter and it's the dimes, like maybe I'm putting like a like, I don't know, like a circle or something around the 3 dimes and putting like 30 next to it, right? And then showing that 30, like drawing a line to the 25 and being like, oh, this is 55. Like me as Alex as a student, that's what I would be doing for sure. Because I never like keeping numbers in my head. I was always like, I had to see it all written out. I'm still the same way, but I like to see it all written out. So that's like what I can think of one example.
So one of the things I like about what you just said was, even though this is very static, the kids might still be coming up with different ways to group the coins or circle the coins, or so it still allows them to think about how they want to approach the task. But as Chad mentioned earlier, I've counted the coins and I'm done. And for so many kids, when they look at a worksheet like this or something in their book, the goal is to get the right answer, hopefully, and finish it. Because there's nothing very engaging about this. The most engaging thing is kids like money.
Mhm.
And so it might be more engaging than a page full of addition problems, but there's really nothing. I would call this a very low cognitive demand task. It's there's a couple of different ways you can approach it, but there's one answer, and I would also say there's not much mathematical thinking going on here. So if you look at the second task, let's think again now about what the role of the teacher would be here. So maybe the teacher starts by putting this problem up on the board.
Letting the kids explore first how well they approach. I'm thinking maybe on my child and wondering what he will do. And he will definitely try to at least figure out something that will be 5 cents and something that will be maybe colors differently if they don't have coins around him. He will try, I'll say, I've seen him doing this, like the green is 5 and the blue is, and then trying to explore and see, let's start maybe and figure out which is the way they are exploring and asking why you choose the greatest first and why you then try to, that's what I think he will do. He will try first maybe something that will be great or big. So he will be nearby 50 cents and then try to fit something. And then since this is not the first, or we are asking for many ways of fitting 50 cents, then he will explore or trying to divide and always asking why are you doing this? And then what else you can do? And what if you change this? And those kind of questions while I'm trying to.
So Paula, what I like about what you said is the teacher's role is quite different in this task than it was in the first task. So the teacher's role in my mind is really to present the task to the kids, make sure that they understand what's going on and can ask questions if they don't understand. This particular first grade teacher, it was in a very poor neighborhood in Cleveland. It was first grade. So she said they were they were just very energetic. They couldn't sit still. Typical, hey. Sorry, my little dog is teasing my big dog. Just like the kids would in a first grade class. You guys. Hang on 1 second. I got to grab the little one. Come here, you little troublemaker. He's getting fast. Anyway, the other thing that the first grade teacher told me was in our classrooms, I'm sorry, I'm going to nab him. In our classrooms, oftentimes teachers have access to, wait, give me 1 minute. This is going to go on forever. You stop it. Come here, you little rubber rat. Come here.
That's good. We're putting this on YouTube.
Anyway, the teachers might have access to plastic coins for the kids to use. They kind of look like the real thing, but this particular first grade teacher said she had been collecting, she had a piggy bank with all kind of coins in. And she broke the piggy bank, or she emptied the piggy bank and brought real coins in for the kids to use. She said she didn't count at the end of the class to make sure all the money was still there. She didn't really care, but the kids were excited about touching real coins and working with real money. And then, Paulo, the other thing I heard you say was the kids would work together in groups and start to tackle the problem. And I heard you say the role of the teacher is to be asking kids questions and watching what they're doing. So unlike the previous task, where the teacher would get up and probably explain what to do and maybe model what to do and maybe be a little more open-ended about it. In this one, I think the goal here is not for the teacher to demonstrate anything. The kids have to have, hang on. He's just too fast for me. The kids have to have some prerequisite knowledge. I mean, you can't just throw a bunch of coins on the table and say, solve this problem.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But, and so the kids go to work on solving the problem. And the teacher asks questions exactly like what you described, Paola. Why did you do that? How did you do that? Show me what you did. What happened, and I'm going to wrap this up because I know there are other things to talk about. What happened in this first grade class was very interesting. And this teacher was very aware, I can still picture her, was very tuned into what the kids were doing. First of all, the thing that she noticed when she put the kids in small groups was she assumed that they all knew how to count coins. They all recognized and could count coins. They had never counted real coins before. They had always done the work in the textbook. And so this was the first time that they had real coins in their hands and they had to figure out what to do with them. So she had kids that recognized the coins, but weren't real sure about their value, because in real life, the coins look different than they do in a picture. She had kids that knew the value, but didn't know how to put them together. So what happened in these small groups was the kids needed one another. You know, I know that this is a quarter and that's worth 25 cents. And another kid says, oh, I know if I had a dime onto that, if I had 10 onto that, I'll get 35 cents. So it was really a real life situation where you're working in a group and everybody's got an important role because they all bring knowledge to the situation. The next thing that happened was the kids said they didn't know what to do. Typical stuff when the first time they're given a task like this. I don't know what to do because they've never really, you stop it right now. I'm gonna put you in your pen and you weren't gonna like that. So she did have a group that came up to her and immediately said 2 dimes and a nickel. And her response was, is there another answer? And she said, the look I got from these kids, 6-year-olds, was, what do you mean, is there another answer? And she said, I realized they had never had a task where, number one, they hadn't been taught how to approach it before they did it. But number two, that there was more than one answer. And she said there was certainly some frustration, but she said the kids worked on this for an hour and they were having so much fun trying to come up with different ways to solve it. And she said she had never seen these kids work on anything for a total hour and be totally engaged. And at the end of an hour, she said, typical classroom, you know, I got to move on to something else now, another subject. And she said to the kids, do you want to know how many different ways there are? And to a kid, they said, no, we want to work on this tomorrow. We want to find them all ourselves. And can we work on it more tomorrow? And how many kids at the end of a math class, number one, don't want to know if they're right or not, or want to continue working on it the next day. And so I thought that was really powerful. The other thing she said, she noticed, that's when she noticed the difference in the expectation of these 2 tasks, that this is a very traditional, mundane, count the coins type of task, get the answer and I move on to the next one, where this is a much more engaging, open-ended. And I love the questions that Chad asked earlier, because now I can say, how do you know if you got them all? How did you organize your work? And maybe first graders can't do this. And I think, in all honesty, I think she had 25 cents, not 50 cents. And I think she did not have quarters, but she had pennies. So I bring that up because I could differentiate this task based on the needs of my kids. 5th graders or 4th graders, I could say, how many different ways could you make change for $1? You're buying something for $1. How many different ways could you pay for it? There's a lot of different ways, by the way, that you can make change for $1. Then we can start getting into finding patterns and organizing my thinking. And so the reason I brought these up was I learned so much from that teacher that day. Was not only are these 2 very different tasks, but what they're expecting kids to do and what kids take away from those tasks is so different. And even engagement aside, the mathematics kids are doing in that first task is very low-level mathematics. Count the coins, I'm done. The mathematics kids are doing they're really creating mathematics when they're solving that second problem.
Right.
So I don't know if you have any more comments about that, but at that point, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it back over to Chad.
Yeah, so thank you. Like, what comments do you guys have? What thoughts do you have? I have a couple that I want to follow and end on, but let me hear what your thoughts are, Alex.
One of the things that comes to mind, or that I would have added when you asked what is happening at the beginning of this task being shared, has to do with what is the problem asking, because I find that when we're in classrooms with students, obviously there's a mix of students that have Spanish as their first language or some other language as their first language, and just the process of when it's put in context, in a context like that requires you to be able to like analyze the problem. What is it asking for? Like, it might be really basic, but that is one thing that I think I noticed and that I would point out if I were looking at the difference in a task like that. Just because it's something that if we're thinking about like what's assumed of the students is, okay, they have this level of reading and analysis, they're going to be able to read this problem and pull out like what is the main idea or what's the question, right? So that's just one thing that like comes to mind immediately on.
Well, that's such a good point. And so let me just pause for a second and add my bit to that, because what I hear you saying is the teacher's role is to make sure the students can engage in the task and then do the math, and they have the information they need. You could see just, and I think this is going to ask us to make a fundamental shift in what a teacher thinks of themselves as, because I mean, any teacher, I think, really wants their students to do well, right? It's like desperately, I want them to get the right answer. I want to get you the right answer so much that I'm going to order the coins. I'm going to tell you what each one's worth and how you add 25 and 10, not the whole answer, but I'm going to tell you that. And then when you're sort of counting right, I'm going to nod and tell you where you put the answer when you stop at the right number, even if they're still counting. And it's not because I don't care. It's because I want you to get the right answer. But we know the teacher's role is different now. The teacher's role is you really have to erase your knowledge. You know, what I heard Alex is a perfect illustration of what the knowledge a teacher needs to have. Okay, I'm going to tell you everything there is to know about this problem. You know, let's make sure you understand. And if not, I'll talk to you in your native language or have one of your classmates talk to you in your native language. Let's put it in the context. Okay, like Fatima was talking about. Okay, you're at the market. Now you have these coins and you have to do this. How are you going to pay? Is that, and then I love, Paul, didn't you ask the question, which is the best way to pay? A teacher's job is to ask these questions and to build this knowledge with the students. I think that's the big shift, and that's what these questions allow. Okay, other comments, or if anyone wants to follow up on what I said.
Also, something I will add to that will be after making sure they understood what the problem is and letting them explore and reaching for some results, maybe in groups, then sharing to each other. That's something really important.
Yes.
Learn to listen to each other, what the other group might say, or why you look for this answer and the other group have the same answer, but how? And why is different from yours? And is that the same the way you thought? And if not, what's different? So that's something really important to explore other point of views from other students. That's something really important to do after finishing the exploring, even if you have the right answer.
Yeah.
So there, I just want to share with you, I've been doing some writing for a textbook company, and we're actually taking each lesson and we're in the teacher's guide, we're actually showing two different ways you can teach it. The second way is much more open-ended, but it also has a protocol for how you do that. And I want to build off of what Paulo just said. So you introduce the problem, and you really get kids to understand the problem more deeply by asking them questions, not explaining it to them. And then the kids have a time to, the second part of the lesson is the kids have time to work in small groups, and they have a considerable amount of time. Like I said, these first graders spent an hour on this, and the teacher thought it was and they wanted to continue the next day, and the teacher thought that was time well spent and was willing to spend that amount of time to let the kids actually explore. And then the next part of the lesson is exactly what you described, Paulo. I mean, they might be looking at each other's groups while they're working and what they're doing, but then there's actually a time for the kids to get up and the teacher can pick a couple groups to share. Well, how did you do it? What are some of the answers you got? How did you get those? And then another group would get up that maybe did it a different way and share their way of thinking, so that there's actually a dedicated time after kids have worked on this problem to actually share their strategies and share their thinking with one another. And oftentimes what will happen, that didn't necessarily happen in this first grade class, but this is the protocol that we've tried to set up. Oftentimes what will happen, this happens when I'm working with teachers and they're working on something, and I ask a group to get up and share their thinking, and they have done it a very different way than I ever thought of. And I just look at them and I go, that is so cool. And oftentimes their way I like better than the way I thought about it. And then I try to solve it their way. So actually giving kids that time, you can see the whole focus of the class is changing now. The kids are sharing ideas with one another. The kids are sharing strategies, and I would build on, what strategy did you like the best? What strategy do you think was the easiest to do? Was there a strategy that we use the word efficient a lot, maybe at first I was just randomly trying to put coins together and see if they made 50 cents for that particular problem. Is there a way, as you were working, was there a way that you could hone in more on getting to 25 cents rather than random, or getting to 50 cents in this particular problem, rather than randomly just taking a handful of coins and seeing if they added up to 50 cents. So that coming together, that bringing it all together, and the teacher has a really active role in facilitating that conversation. The kids are still doing all the talking, but the teacher is asking questions. The teacher is making sure that it's really hard for a first grader to explain their thinking. So the teacher is supporting what the kids are trying to say, with maybe revoicing, maybe not, maybe having another kid explain it. But I think that dedicated time for kids to actually formally share the way they tackle the problem is really valuable. And then the next step in our particular protocol is we give them a similar problem, and maybe a different context, maybe something else, where they would use the same, I don't want to say skills, the same kind of thinking to solve it more on their own. So now that we've come together and we've all talked about the way we tackle this problem, here's another one for you to try. And there might not be as much productive struggle, because now I have some strategies to figure out how to go ahead and do this.
Mhm.
All right, I'm going to shut up now.
It's engaging. Any other thoughts?
One last thought.
Uh-huh.
After they share the ideas, if we find some of them are really similar, it's really important for us as a teacher to say that out loud. Maybe they just didn't realize this representation is just a different representation of the same idea. So making those connections is the last part, important part of this part of sharing things. Because sometimes they are just sharing this information or the way they think, and that's fine. And they get the idea that, oh, I got it, and you got it, and that's great. We have different ways of thinking, and that's great. But even more powerful is to make connections between what I did with what you did, and try to find, why is this similar to mine, and what connects this representation to this one.
So thinking about this idea of never saying anything a student can say, if you're teaching the class, instead of saying, oh, that's similar to so-and-so's, what are you going to do?
So
you know what I'm saying? Because I know what I heard you say is, as a teacher, I would make sure that the class students saw that this answer and this answer are similar. But I'm thinking about that idea of never say anything a student can say. So instead, how can you do that?
Yeah, maybe rearranging things and showing, and then asking the question. Like, you have this one and then this one other, and what do you think between these two, and which kind of connections do you find between these two? And they will say that once you help them to rearrange things so they can see it. Actually showing. When you choose some work, maybe that you are seeing in the classroom that represents the major, or you've seen this is the way that someone is thinking, and this is the way that maybe the rest of the class is thinking, trying to choose wisely the work, and then showing will help them making this connection, or maybe arrange them.
Can I propose something? Can I propose maybe what I would do now, that as I've grown as a teacher, because thinking also that I'm sort of erasing my knowledge, I'm going to be standing. They're going to be maybe standing also presenting their ideas, because if they're standing, they're learning better. We know that they're thinking more, and they present ideas. And I might go, oh, I see what you're doing. Gosh, that seems so familiar. Does that familiar to anyone else in this class? Because it seems like it to me, but I can't put my finger on why it's familiar. And then someone else might go, oh, it's because of this. And then I'll listen to them and I'll ask the group that's presenting, is that similar to your idea or not? And suddenly they're talking to each other. And by week 5 or 6 of class, someone go, well, that's the same thing we said, it's just different. And they're starting to talk together. And my job is just to sort of watch, and help prompt those things. That's one thing I would think about. But and so this is really, it's this nuanced thing of sort of erasing your knowledge and being fascinated by what you hear with them, but also knowing where the hell you're going, right? And why you're there. That's super hard. But once you figure it out, it's fun, man. It's just a blast. So that's
The
what I'm
other thing
thinking.
that Paulo said, that I don't want to skip over because I think it's really important,
Mhm.
is having kids use different representations. Maybe some kids wrote the numbers
Yes.
down of the values of each coin. Maybe some kids use the coins. Maybe some kids drew pictures of the coins and put the value inside the little picture the way kids do. So this is a wonderful opportunity to have kids share the representations that they used. And by the way, I also think, so you still have that struggling kid that just didn't even know how to get started. Those different representations, that student may find a way in that sharing to say, oh, doing it this way makes sense to me. I was trying to write numbers down and it was too hard, but if I actually put the coins down in front of me and grouped them together and counted that way rather than writing numbers down and trying to add them, that's a much better way to do it. So in that respect, you're opportunity to solve the problem in wherever they are. And oftentimes when I did this, I'll share two more things and then I'm going to put myself on mute and leave myself on mute. The first time I tried to do this with fifth graders, and give them a problem, they rebelled. I mean, they were just moaning and groaning, and this is too hard. I can't do it. So I, as a teacher, had to back up and kind of lead them a little bit more as a class and say, well, what's one way we might organize our thinking? And in the back of my mind, I had a strategy that perhaps they'd never seen before that I wanted to give them as a future tool, because sometimes kids really have no clue how to solve a problem. But the next time it was a little easier, and the next time it was easier. And by the fourth time I gave them a problem like this, I had to just get out of their way because they had the tools also. They had some experience with strategies on how to approach a task. So I think you have to gauge where your kids are too, and then figure out, even as you're teaching, this isn't going very well. What do I have to do? What do I have to do now? Because these kids aren't getting this at all. The other thing I also don't want to skip over is what I also love about this task, and Chad, you and I talked about it, so I don't want to lose it. We talk about mathematics being culturally relevant. And sometimes when you're doing a problem with just numbers, sometimes the numbers in and of themselves are fascinating and they don't need a context. But I think that this problem, it's not very difficult to make culturally relevant. You talk about the marketplace in Ecuador. I picture in the Galapagos. You talk about the marketplace in Guatemala. You talk even about bargaining. Chad, you and I have had a lot of experience with that in some of the markets in Guatemala. And so it's very easy to take that particular problem and just change the context so that it becomes more culturally relevant for the kids. I don't have to think real hard about, oh, what am I going to do here? How am I going to make this culturally relevant? It's very easy to adapt to where the kids are coming from. Now I'm on mute permanently.
No, Linda, we like your comments. This is why I'm so excited about, this is one reason I really called you earlier, because I think you're one of the best people at doing this kind of thing that I've ever seen, because you remember the stories, you make these really meaningful connections. So, and you could see that if you ever see Linda present at a conference, you probably will be standing because all the seats will be full, but this is one reason, because she's got these great stories and makes sense. Any other comments about this? Because I'd love to talk a little bit about another idea that I have that will help. Great. Okay, so, and it also stems from this, it's like a nice connection to Paula's mentioning the multiple representations. How can we represent something? And we're going to talk more about cognitive guided instruction in the details and understand structure of problems and why they're important and powerful. And Linda knows a little bit about this, but we're hopefully going to get into that once we're through COVID. The person who's supposed to work with us is in LA, and right now LA is being slammed crazy bad with it. She has 5 family members who had it a month ago and is really struggling. So hopefully she'll be available. But I do want to say, I find that using cognitive guided instructions, like questions that are like the things that I'll talk about in a second, are a nice way for teachers to sort of step into student-centered instruction. Because it provides sort of a recipe for it. And I've sort of mentioned this to some of you guys I know before, but the way I see cognitive guided instruction questions are really putting a basic math problem, you know, what's 6 + 8, and placing it in a context and stepping back and letting the student work. And so I did this when I was getting my PhD. I started working with my daughter, Charlotte, when she was in kindergarten. And then we progressed forward. And with her kindergarten class, I started doing these less questions, starting off easy. Like, for instance, I would say, Charlotte was at our home, and on one window, she counted 4 spiders. And on the other window, she counted 3. How many spiders does she have? Now, that's all I say. And then kids are going to try to answer right away, because some may have it. But what I do is I say, your job now is to, first of all, think about this and try to think about how you might solve it yourself. You could draw pictures, you can count on your fingers. If you want to use numbers, you can, however you want to do it. And then I want you to present your answer to your partner or your group of 3 or 4 that have come together. And when I had parents could come, they would come and they'd volunteer, and they'd also listen. And I make sure the parents could say those words. I understand what you're saying. And then they present to the class. So it's like, you know, share, pair, think, share, pair. This is what they're doing here with this. But the key things are, as a teacher, I don't do anything other than maybe like I'm watching around looking for their thinking. So if a student seems to be lost, I go, well, what about drawing? What does one window look like? Draw the spiders from one window. How about the spiders for the other window? Now, can you tell me how? So prompting solution strategies, but not necessarily solutions. And then I listen to their answers, and I do this thing where I make people help them connect. Have you guys heard of those kinds of things, those problems before? And does that make sense to you? Yeah. Some key things to do is to use students' names in the book, in the class. Because like if I say Alex and Fatima, they're gonna be like, oh my gosh, I want to figure out how many there are there. And then you can completely change the structure. And what happened really quickly with kindergartners is I had to challenge them. I had to make more challenging problems. So then you go, oh, there are 3 spiders in one window, and there's some more in the other. I know there are 7 total. How many spiders in the other window? So all of a sudden they're doing something that's a little bit more complicated. And again, there are lots of solution strategies, and the key is for us to share them with each other. Because, you know, you might start with like some concrete manipulatives or pictures. Eventually you want to get to where they can actually do like 7 - 3 or 4 plus a number is equal to 7 and stuff like that. So that's generally cognitive guided instructions. There's multiplication problems, you know, there's addition problems. And what I ended up doing with the students in her class was thinking about, I just like literally wrote down an arithmetic problem, you know, 5 × 4 + 3 × 2. And then I put it into a context of a problem, and I let the kids answer the problem. I step back and answer, and every single time they got it right. And so like, here's one I wrote for 3rd graders. And so I want you guys to tell me what you think you might do to solve it, if you can keep up with it, and how can you make it culturally relevant, because this is maybe not. So parents are being asked to help out for game day. If there are 6 games that require 3 parents and 4 games that require 2 parents, how many parents will need to be there to help? Okay, so there are 6 games that require 3 parents and 4 games that require 2 parents. How many parents are needed to help? And so that's what I presented to 3rd graders and 2nd graders. So that's a pretty complicated problem for the kids, right? And they all answered it.
Which level you were working with?
Pardon me? What grade level?
Yeah.
So they were 2nd and 3rd graders, which I think you guys are 1 year behind us, right? Or is it the same?
No, we are the same.
Okay. Yeah, so like 7 and 8-year-olds. So you guys got the answer, I'm sure, right? It's
Could you please repeat the numbers? You say six
yes,
games?
yes. There's 6 games that require 3 parents.
Yeah, and 4 games, 2 parents.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Ok, entonces, Fátima, el problema
Yeah, that's good.
es uno que tiene que ver con diferencias como partidos de, digamos, de fútbol, donde necesitan apoyo de los padres de familia. Entonces, como que en su calendario hay 6 partidos donde necesitan ayuda de 3 padres de familia y 4 partidos donde necesitan ayuda de 2 padres de familia. Entonces, la pregunta es cuántos padres de familia se necesitan para ayudar en total.
Gracias, Alex.
Ooh. It's a lot of parents, huh? So what answers do you guys have?
I did a question, but I did it to myself because I was offline.
Okay.
Yeah, I asked if the parents can go to many games or just one per game.
Oh, that's a good question. Can they be with one games? Can you say it again? Because
If I'm a parent, could I go to different games or I can go just to one game?
Mm-hmm. Right. They can only help with one game. That would be a question. That's a good question to ask. That changes everything. Yeah.
I had a similar question. I thought the same time when it was coming up.
Yeah.
But if that weren't the case, then what I got was 26.
26
parents.
to get 18 in. Yeah. And I mean, of course, these are easier problems for us, right? For kids, they're going to draw pictures, maybe. Some are going to, but you want them to eventually get to that point. How can I make it culturally like appropriate for Guatemala? What can I do with that? So basically what you have is this. This equation, right? Can you all see that? 3 times 6 plus 2 times 4. So can you make up a story that uses those numbers? That makes it like a problem, story problem.
Wait, can you show it?
Yeah, it's 3 times 6 plus 2 times 4.
Okay. I mean, I could think of one off the top of my head that goes back to what we were saying about like the market, if we're thinking context of here and like the kind of thing that we might use in a classroom. So if it was 3 and 6 and
2 and 4.
Okay, 3 and 6 and 4 and 2. Okay. So you go to the market. You go to the market and you need to buy 6 avocados and 4 mangoes for something that your mom is making. So how much money are you going to need maybe in order to
Because each one costs 3 and got it.
And 2, yeah.
So that's gonna be a question kids are gonna be able to answer because they do it.
Yeah, because they're
gonna argue with you about the price, right? They're gonna say, well, that's not how much they cost.
Yeah, also that. They'll be like, oh, that's the price for foreigners. Fátima, la pregunta es, usando esos mismos problemas de como algo parecido con 6 6 por 3 y 4 por 2, que es como un problema que se puede como desarrollar, como que el ejemplo que usé yo es como, vaya, vas al mercado, tu mamá te dijo que tienes que comprar 6 aguacates que valen 3 quetzales cada aguacate y 4 mangos que valen 2 quetzales cada uno. Entonces, ¿cuánto dinero necesita darte tu mamá, por ejemplo? Porque sería otro ejemplo que podrías crear usando esos números.
Estaba pensando en témperas, que justo mi hija está usando témperas. Entonces está como mezclando y como para tu primer dibujo necesitas anaranjado, rojo, amarillo y lo vas a mezclar en una tapita, ¿verdad? Para tu siguiente mezcla necesitas verde, azul y amarillo nuevamente. Entonces, como cuántos colores mezclaste al final para hacer tu dibujo, para el total de colores dibujando. Que tal vez no es similar porque utilizaron multiplicación, pero aquí bajé un poquito a lo que estoy viendo ahorita que está utilizando ella, ¿verdad? Que es como témperas, está como un color, otro color. ¿Cuántos colores has usado? Le empiezan a preguntar.
So Fatima's daughter right now is like making paint from different colors of paints. And so she's thinking of that, how that example could fit in, right? So
Yes,
if
right.
it's even, you're thinking like you have whatever, however many colors are going to need that you add blue into them. And then versus how many are going to need that you add like a yellow or an orange, like she's thinking of how the numbers could fit into that problem so that it's also doing the same for you to like calculate how many types or how many of each color paint you would need to make the different colors or different shades of paint.
Yeah, I like that. So you can see, I mean, the key is when you create the problem, then you solve it yourself and make sure you're using the same strategies that you start with.
I have an idea. I was thinking in a different way of using the same algebra, but I was thinking in an area model. So I will think on maybe trying to find a rectangle, because every time I'm thinking on multiplication, I'm thinking in the area model of a rectangle. So maybe I will do that. I'll try to fix that. That's what I was doing. Maybe trying to do a rectangle that is 6 times 3, and then another one that will be really you will need to add because we're trying to figure out the area of something.
Okay. An area of something. Yeah.
Thus.
That's great. Yes. Right.
3 and something 4 times 2. And then I'll just ask in the kind of questions like, how much is this all without the division actually? So they can figure out how to solve it.
Yes.
Will be a multiplication.
Right. So you might say, Alex and Power are building a clubhouse. And Alex's room is 3 meters by 4 meters or 3 meters by 6 meters. And Power's room is 2 meters by 4 meters. You know, there's going to be a whole debate about, is that fair? Which is great, to be honest. And then they're solving the problem. The other thing I thought about using your model was a garden. So, you know, you have 4 rows of 6 carrots and 3 rows of 2, whatever, cabbages. But again, you just start with the problem and it becomes really a complicated problem. Here's another one I wrote. I think this is a really tough problem. I had to think about it. So I will change the names. So Alex is collecting Harry Potter cards. I'm not sure if you collected Harry Potter cards, but Charlotte did. She uses 21 cards for the first 3 rows. After that, she makes 1 more row. How many cards will she have on that page? Okay, so Charlotte is collecting Harry Potter cards. She uses 21 cards on the first 3 rows. After that, she makes 1 more row. How many cards will she have on the page?
Ok, entonces el problema es que Charlotte, la hija de Chad, colectaba como tarjetitas de Harry Potter. Entonces,
¿Es eso?
usó... Yo no sé la verdad, yo no sé qué son las cartas. Yo nunca las he visto, pero estoy imaginando que sean como Pokémon o algo así, pero
okay.
con
Pokémon,
los personajes de Harry Potter, pienso.
Okay.
algo así, estoy imaginando. Entonces, para las primeras 3 filas, ella usa 21 tarjetitas y luego agrega una fila más. Y la pregunta es, ¿cuántas tarjetas hay en la última fila, creo? How many cards are in the last line?
How many
That's the
cards
question,
will she
right?
have on total? In total.
¿Cuántas tarjetas van a tener en total? Entonces, va a tener en total. Entonces, son 21 tarjetitas para las primeras 3 filas y agregó una fila más después de eso. Entonces, en total, ¿cuántas tarjetitas tiene?
O sea, dijiste 21 para las primeras 3 filas.
Mhm.
Ajá.
Ok, ok. Y luego
Now-
agregó otra más.
What I love about these problems is it's super easy to differentiate because Pao is going, this is super easy. Okay, so Pao, for you, she uses 56 cards on the first 8 rows. After that, she makes 56 and 8 don't go together, do they? I'm totally drawing a blank. Yeah, 56. She uses 56 cards on the first 8 rows. After that, she makes 2 more rows. How many cards does she have on the page? So do you see how I've all of a sudden made it more difficult? If I make it simpler, I say she uses 4 cards in the first, or 6 cards in the first 3 rows. Now how many? That's what I love about these problems. Same problem, just differentiated. What do you think about these problems? They engaging, interesting?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out which kind of answers I will have from my students.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll definitely have some answers like 7. And
Yes.
I would love to have those kind of those are the common answers that you will get sometimes.
Yes, I
Yeah.
love that.
Asking the question like 7 in total, or just because they know what they have to do sometimes and don't go back to the question and just answer whatever they have in the middle.
Right.
Or yeah.
And think about how as a teacher it makes that, like, the thing I think we want to work on at some point, Alex and I were talking about this yesterday, was improv. Because when you say that, I need to think about the question that's going to prompt you to answer it correctly. Because I'm going to go 7 on the whole page. What about the 21? And make you go, hold on, you're right. Oh, crap. But that's really cool to think about that. And that's also why teaching math is more challenging. Because for every problem, you have to think about how every kid's going to answer and how are you going to support that child. It doesn't happen in science. Sorry.
Yeah, but I think this should end with questions like what kind of extra questions you would do after this, seeing this, make a question with this problem. What else you can ask? So we'll make it a even higher level.
For
like creating your own or thinking of a question that's not just adding a row, because that's not something different. But well, would be the first step, but not some like really making them think different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that'd be tough for the students. I mean, that's tough for teachers, I think. What's the context?
Thinking how maybe actually understanding, talking about the area model, I will think, what if I decided to go one more than what you thought before in the row? Like actually thinking on if it's not 7 and but it is 8, what will happen and how that will change. And is thinking that's an important concept we're working right now, is how something that is an area will increment not linearly. So that's something really important to talk with the students while they're exploring this, with this kind of problem.
Yes, that's a great problem. And if you could tell it in a story, when he was going to the builder, he found $100 bill. Now he's going to add 2 more rows. Something like that could be fun. For me, the key is that kids can solve this however they want. They could draw pictures, they can use check marks. What I found was they start off by drawing a very detailed picture, and they realize they don't have time to do that. And so they start doing stick figures and then just checks. And that's great, because that's how we want to go from, you know, like a very literal representation to something that's more abstract. I also think when people talk about going from, you've heard this, right? You go from concrete to pictorial to abstract. In all honesty, I think these are pretty concrete problems. You don't have to actually touch things for them to be concrete necessarily. I think if you can experience it or have experiences to draw on, then that's helpful.
Yeah, that is the kind of maybe lesson that I will pick from the students, something that might be the one who draw every single people or every single card in their paper, and show it, and then try maybe someone that didn't show every single one in the 7 but rectangle. And what about the one that just did algebra, and show them in that order, so they can actually see how the ones that couldn't get to the algebra, thinking maybe 21 divided by 3 it's equal to 7, and then adding the 21 plus 3 will be, how is that seen in the square model, and how is that in the 1 by 1 model?
Yep.
So that's something I will do in my class in order to everyone to reach this understanding.
Right. So the teacher's role now is to support the students engaging in the problem, as Alex had mentioned, but also to select solutions that build complexity or build to something more abstract. That's good. I like that. Do you know, when I was teaching, our school did this, you know, try to stay fit between Thanksgiving and Christmas kind of thing. And so we all had these little pedometers, these things that measure our footsteps, you know, to see how far we walked each day. And I would check. And when I taught a 45-minute class, I walked 1 mile walking around the classroom. So if you, I mean, that's something that's like a super easy thing to tell teachers. You should walk almost a mile in this class period, because you need to be watching what students are saying and listening to their thoughts. And that's helpful. Another thing that's powerful about these is we're going to read, I think we're going to try to go through this book. I want to talk to you guys next. It's called Building Thinking Classrooms. And it's one of the first times I've heard a book in a long time where I've thought, oh my gosh, I'd never thought about it this way. And the idea is we want students to be thinkers, not mimickers. You know, not to like go, oh, Alex has told me, I know the answer. She knows it. I just have to figure out what she wants me to write. So, and what we find, or what they find, is if you give students a textbook, they go, well, there's got to be a solution, because why would they put it in a textbook? It's pretty smart, to be honest. And why would they put it in the solution? So I just have to figure out what they want me to write for this answer. If it's on a piece of paper that you've created, you know, a handout, sort of that way, it's not quite as much. But if you say to students, hey guys, listen, everyone come over here, I'm going to tell you a problem. And you start writing them up on the board, you know, Charlotte's collecting cards and she has 3 rows of 7. Now go figure it out. Here's a piece of paper for you all to do the work. Then they think they have to figure out the answer themselves, because why would he not have this on a piece of paper if he didn't have an answer already for it? So I think that's really cool. So we want to think about these little tricks when we are talking to teachers. So what thoughts, or do you guys want to present a question, or do you have a task you want to give us to look at? Or next week we're going to do more. Next week I'm going to have us, like, what I'd like you guys to do next time is to bring a storybook, just a storybook. Like this one is a storybook from this organization in Africa that they've produced. It's called Lucy Leopard. And it's a story about this little girl who's a leopard who wants to climb a tree. And so I came up with a math activity from it. I don't quite get it yet. I don't know how these are culturally appropriate, because this is the cheetah guy. The father, of course, does the fishing, and the mother stay home and work at the garden. And their house is totally like a European home. which I don't quite understand how this is culturally relevant and produced by Africans, but alas, it's what they love. So I've come up with math activities for it. So I'd like for you guys to bring a children's storybook and try to find a math, like read a page and come up with all the math questions you can ask from that page, because I think that's going to be a very powerful training tool for teachers.
That's a great.
That makes me think of like Hana's workshops that he would do with that, or I've seen him do a couple here that were storybook ones. But I loved his workshops. They were so cool. So I'm excited.
Yeah. Oh, good. Got it. Good.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna work with my kid.
Yes, you will. That would be
I'm
awesome.
gonna ask him to share with me his favorite story, and then we will try to figure out questions with him. So I'll listen to him, what he says, and what I'll ask him. So
Yeah.
I'll try to.
That's awesome. We'll do that, and we'll have that for next week. So then we'll listen to each other's questions. We'll think about how we can differentiate them, how we can make them more like higher cognitive demand so they can enter it lots of ways, and how there are lots of solutions. Let me tell you the one question. Here's what I'm presenting tomorrow as an introduction to teaching differently. So instead of having children sit and do 20 subtraction problems, what if we did the problem like this? So Mr. Cheetah, let's see, here we go. Mr. Leopard was fishing, and he came home and he put his fish on the table and helped his wife in the garden with cooking. And they wanted to make a salad, which I don't understand why a leopard would eat a salad with their fish, but alas, they are. So they wanted to make a salad with it. There were 10 carrots in the garden, and when they left, there were only 3 left. Okay. How many carrots did Mr. Leopard and how many carrots did Mrs. Leopard eat? So all of a sudden, there's a whole lot of thinking you guys have to do, right? Who's going to eat more? Who's not? So the question comes alive as opposed to going, what's 10 minus 3 or 7? So that's sort of what I'm thinking. What do you guys think of that question?
And which level are you thinking we might be thinking? Just for, yeah.
I mean, to that question, I think could be engaged at a lot of levels, right? Because if I were doing this with upper grade kids, I'd say, let's figure out every possible combination. Are there 7 or 14? And then what happens with 8 and 10? I mean, the pattern is growing, right, by 1 linearly, and it's growing by 2. Why is it growing by 2? Those are questions I'd ask. What if we put limits on it? They have to eat, each has to eat at least 2. What happens? Or what if 3 people come? Then does it change dramatically? So you can do a lot of really cool things with that problem if you do higher kids. Lower kids, with Charlotte's, 3rd graders or 1st graders or 2nd graders, just draw a picture and solve the problem. Yeah. That's what's powerful about these. There's a lot of entry points and a lot of ways to differentiate. All right. So what do you think? Has this been helpful today?
Yeah, it is. I have a question about those spaces. So what is the plan for us to do the spaces? So we're gonna stop for a while to do this kind of activities that I think it's great, but just for me to organize my head.
Yes.
So reading for a while and then going back with the book you mentioned, or what's the plan? Could you please?
Yeah, so the plan is to do at least 2 weeks of this, maybe 3, of just sort of developing some activities. What I want to do is next week, the storybooks, and have you guys, and then listen to each other and maybe even come up with a couple of tasks ourselves. The week after, I want to take like some Mathematica tasks, activities, and make them more complicated. I love Linda's example because I bet that's in the book, something like that. And it can be sort of challenging. It's better than just straight up numbers, but it's not a good task because of the things we know. And so how can we change that and help teachers learn to change that? So that's at least the next 2 or 3 weeks. And then the question that I will have is, do we want to go through the 5 practices book, or do we want to go through Peter Ledgedal's book? This we do not have in Spanish, but I would review each chapter and then write something. I don't even know if I have a version of it for you, I want to buy a bunch and send it to you, but I'll see if I can find it as a PDF. I know the author, I met him, and I know that there are a lot of people who are on an education advisory board that want to participate with this book. So it could be good. It's also, like I said, it's a book, it has these strategies that I'd never thought of that are really simple, that make sense. Like how you present a task. Or their research says, here's another one. When kids work in groups, they know their role. Like if I'm in a group with Paul and Alex, I know that I'm going to be the one that's there to cut up and to sort of just throw out crazy ideas. You guys are going to keep me focused. So what I want to do then is, as a teacher, I want to switch those groups randomly, and the kids have to know it's random. And I want to do it almost daily. So I might have cards, and everyone who picks a 4 is in a group together, and everyone who picks a 2 is in a group together. So the kids know it's random. That means they have to all equally participate and think on their own. Those are just cool little strategies that I never really thought about that are in this book. So I'm thinking we go through that. What do you think? Do you want to do the 5 practices book, or do you want to do Peter Legedal's book next?
Me personally, I would love to read another book.
Okay. Is that good?
I agree. I think, yeah, because we're digging into 5 practices in the Spanish ones, but I think, something new and different, and also so that we can learn from that experience and thinking about like our future modules. I think Paul and I are always like thinking about that as well.
Yeah.
So.
I'm super excited to do it. I'm trying to figure out how we can get it to you. I don't know if I want to give do a 1-page or 2-page white paper for each chapter and let you guys read it and then have it translated into Spanish, or just scan it and get it to you all. And then we can figure out for Fatima, I'm not sure if we have it. That's a lot to translate, to be honest, if we had a whole chapter translated. But we'll try to figure something out for her. Can you read English, Fatima? Pretty okay? Un poquito?
Poquito, quizá, pero mínimo.
Okay. Well, you guys can talk about it in advance, Alex. Maybe that's something you guys do. We'll figure it out. Okay, that's awesome. Start working on that. So 2 weeks of tasks at least, maybe 3, and then Peter's book.
Okay.
Great. Oh, and I have just realized I will cut this short because I don't think we should put it on YouTube. That I'll videotape, copy the book, and send it to you.
Probably not.
Yes. All right. Thank you guys for today. Yeah.
Sorry, Chad. I'm just wondering, because I was dealing with the goals today with Manuela, and so this plan is to start maybe a new book, if this one not, maybe another one, but the idea is to continue with learning labs through all the year.
Yes, I think this becomes I think we continue doing this. My goal is for you guys to, to me, I think of each book as almost like a seminar, graduate seminar course. I want you guys to have that knowledge at your fingertips, and you can, so you could talk to people, maybe the way I do, So I think eventually we might have you guys leading some of them and talking about them. We might revisit some of the old ones and have you all lead them and practice even throwing new ideas together and putting them together in a way that makes sense to people who maybe don't. So, and I think you're doing that, right, in the Spanish language ones. That's really powerful experiences.
Yeah, it is. Mm-hmm. It's one of my favorite programs right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And to me, it's really has transformed the way I think about the work we do, right? Because if we have Fatima and Claudia and you, Paul, and Maria talking to Ecuadorians about teaching differently, and then we develop that team of people to be 40 or 50, maybe they want to come to a conference and we work with them through that and we support them. That's a way we scale. And it means more powerful because you don't need to hear a white man tell you how you should teach. So you can. Most people shouldn't.
All right. Thanks, Chad.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, guys. Talk to you later. Have a good night.
See you.
Bye.
Mira.